Top of the morning to ya, it's me, Rob Necronomicon, back with another review, Advanced Fighting Fantasy RPG 2nd Edition by Arion Games. I've been rereading this gem of a game again when I've had some free time, and I think it deserves more love. Some quick history before I start the main review. For those who may not know, AFF is based on the original fighting fantasy game books that were released back in 1982. I'd actually been playing D&D Basic at that point, but these books formed a seminal part of my childhood while I was in my early teens. They gave me that RPG hit I needed during the exceedingly tedious and dreary school week. I'd never heard that there was a role-playing game released, and based on the world of Titan until a few years ago. I was very invested in Warhammer Fantasy roleplay at that time, and had dropped D&D decades earlier. It was only when I started getting into the OSR movement did this game pop onto my radar. Not that this is an OSR game per se, I'd been hearing good things about it and it tugged at my nostalgia strings. But even before I bought the PDF I did think, could one actually make a decent RPG using these very limited and basic mechanics? I was honestly very skeptical. However, after delving into the PDF, I quickly retracted my initial thoughts. From the off, AFF feels very much like a trimmed-down regular fantasy RPG, but it definitely has its own flavor, which sets it apart from its D&D counterpart, etc. At first glance, the world of Titan feels very much like a high fantasy RPG, and while it has many high fantasy elements, the game itself plays like a low fantasy game. That is to say, that nothing feels overpowered and you won't ever have heroes that feel invincible. Even a seasoned hero could well be dropped by a few orcs if they roll well. Like most fantasy RPGs, you have stats and various races one can play, each with their own specifics: human, dwarf and elf. That said, there are spot rules for creating different heroes. I mean, really different. Have you ever wanted to play a Rhino Man? Unlike most other games, the statistics for your heroes are limited to 4, which I like. It keeps things nice and simple and makes creating a character very easy. However, these stats go beyond the regular fighting fantasy books. Added to skill, stamina and luck are magic and magic points. Should you wish to play a sorcerer or wizard, limited or minor magic is also available in the form of cantrips. Technically, this is open to any hero, but only a dedicated wizard, priest or sorcerer can wield significant magic in the game. Creating a character is simple and will take you about 10 minutes. Each race has starting abilities and characteristics. These are then modified through a series of points, but there are optional rules should you wish to create a truly random character. The 2nd edition also incorporates the concept of a sorcerer hero from Steve Jackson's Sorcery Adventure game books. The characters also have access to special skills and talents, allowing you to customize your hero even further. These skills will have a significant effect on the character's performance, especially as they grow with experience, but they can also add to the tone of the character's overall concept. For even quicker creation, the book provides you with a series of archetypes. Included are warrior, archer, rogue, barbarian, wizard, to name a few. Given the modular nature of the system and with the ability to choose special skills and talents, you can literally build any kind of hero you'd like. So unlike D&D and many other fantasy games, your character does not need to be limited. Want to fight a thief with cantrips? You got it. The core book feels very complete to me and has everything you need to play a satisfying game. Whether it's a short one-shot or a long-term campaign, all the information presented is very easy to digest, and the language is sharp and direct. To be honest, I've not got the patience to read huge tomes anymore. These days I want to be able to digest a book and play it as soon as possible, and AFF delivers. The basic rules comprise of tests opposed and unopposed based on the applicable characteristic, usually skill or magic. Luck is kept for different situations. For the most part, this will be in the form of the skill characteristic. Basically, this tells you how competent the hero is overall in a physical sense. However, should a magical character be casting a spell, then the magic characteristic will come into play and it can even be substituted for a knowledge check if it's related to magic, etc. A character rolls 2d6 then adds his special skill if he has one, and any modifiers that the GM feels are needed for that particular situation. A roll under the total indicates a success, and that's basically it. There are Of course, optional rules and specific rules for other situations like mounted combat or drowning, etc. The luck stat is worth mentioning here and is exactly as it sounds. It's a character's luck, plain and simple. It's used in situations where skill is perhaps not applicable. It can also be used to provide you with some bonuses. However, every time you use it, it will diminish. So you've got to be careful as it's a finite resource. Given the rules are so simple, the GM can easily adjudicate for any situation on the spot without having to hunt through a huge tome. The system provides the players and the GM with a number of additional rules that are optional, but it also encourages you to chop and change them as you need to. For me, I'm quite happy to keep the rules the way they are, because they are pretty robust and work well. Magic, like everything else in the game, is well thought out and balanced. It's easy to implement with a decent range of spells available to the players. Besides the minor magic or cantrips, there is arcane magic, sorcery, and priestly clerical type spells. Each style has their own flavor. The spell lists are not exhaustive, but there are plenty to keep the players engaged for a long time. One thing that is perhaps a little strange at first is weapon damage. Each weapon type has its own damage table. These are of course very simple and only require a roll of 1d6. The tables change with the deadliness of the weapon. So, obviously, a long sword is far more likely to do a lot more damage than a cudgel. Besides the main rules and character information, etc., the rulebook has loads of material. There is a decent amount of game master advice, which is always good for the new GM, for example, how to plan and run adventures. There is further information with plot hooks, locations and examples of subplots. There is an extensive variety of creatures that you can throw at your players, and how to create new ones should you wish. Creatures' abilities are also listed too. The world of Titan is not neglected, covering its history to major locations. So even if you've never checked out any of the original books, you'll never feel like you're in the dark. Religion is covered with places of worship, gods, and priestly magic. There are extra optional rules, details on treasure and magic items, and a lot more besides. If you like solo RPGs, this book will be a real joy, given its mechanics and history. But there is even a random dungeon generator that you could use, if solo is your thing. In conclusion, the book is 170 pages, for the PDF, and none of it is wasted. There's a lot of bang for your buck here, and there's plenty of more material available from Arion Games should you wish to add more elements to your game. If you like old school games, then I think this is one game that you should have in your collection. And given the sheer amount of gaming books that you can still get your hands on, you'll never be short of ideas. However, I think this game would also be great for the modern gamer too, who perhaps wants to have a peek into how games were played back in the day, and in a world that is more interesting than anything 5e has to offer. In my opinion, given the game's origin and mechanics, it never feels restrained like D&D can at certain times. The characters will never be rooted to their career and will be a lot more adaptable and customizable, but also simple at the same time. I think many will like this game if they like old school gaming and wish to revisit their childhood. The game is a fantastic intro for RPGs for the beginner, but also has easily enough material to satisfy a veteran gamer also. The book's aesthetics are sparse and also have that old school vibe, which I love, including some beautiful black and white artwork. That said, it's quite basic and also has a few spelling mistakes, but this takes away nothing from the game of course. However, if you're a gamer that likes lots of crunch, and a more modern aesthetic with a fancy layout and lots of color artwork, then this game might not be for you. In this day and age, I love to see indie folks keeping classic material like this alive. So if it at all sounds interesting, you should send some coins over to Arion Games. Thanks for tuning in. UK82, Punk's not dead.